do with the disease of the heart. Now he's going to move into the body, right? How Al-Fātiḥah is a cure for the body. And so this is like the amazing part here, the way that Ibn al-Qayyim presents it. So he says here, وَحُقَّ لِسُورَةٍ تَشْتَمِلُ عَلَى هَذَيْنِ الشِّفَائَيْنِ أَنْ يُسْتَشْفَى بِهَا مِنْ كُلِّ مَرَضٍ. So he's saying here that it is worthy that such a surah, such a chapter, which comprises both these two types of cure, meaning the cure for the hearts and the cure for the bodies. Right, because Al-Fātiḥah, as we said in the title, it is shifa for the qulub, it is shifa for the abdan. Because the surah is like this, then it is worthy that a person seeks through it a cure. He treats himself from every disease, right? Not just the disease of the heart, but also the disease of the body as well. Al-Fātiḥah is a cure for every disease of the body, just as it is a cure for every disease of the heart. Why? Because it treats the roots. What are the roots? Jahl and corruption in intent, and riya and kibriya. It treats the roots, right? And it stops everything else. It stops all of the diseases coming and consuming and killing the heart. In the same way, he says that وَلِهَذَا لَمَا اشْتَمَلَتْ عَلَى هَذَا الشِّفَاء الَّذِي هُوَ أَعْظَمُ الشِّفَاءَيْنِ. So basically, given that Al-Fātiḥah has the cure for the heart, which is the greatest of the cures, then كَانَ حُصُولُ الشِّفَاء الْأَدْنَى بِهَا أَوْلَى. Think about what he's saying here. He's saying that given that Al-Fātiḥah is a cure, it is the greatest cure for the greatest of two things, which is the heart, because the heart's the king of the body, right? So if Al-Fātiḥah is going to cure the heart, which is the greatest of the cures, how then can it not be a cure for the thing which is the lesser of the two? What's the lesser of the two? It's the body, right? Because the heart comes first, and then the body is less. So he's saying, if Al-Fātiḥah is a cure for the greatest of the two things, then the greater cure, how then can it not cure the lesser of the two things? Meaning that it is a treatment and a cure for the diseases of the body as well. So he says, كَانَ حُصُولُ الشِّفَاء الْأَدْنَى بِهَا أَوْلَى. Meaning that a person being cured of his bodily illness by way of Al-Fātiḥah is even more so it should be the case. So he says, فَلَا شَيْءٌ أَشْفَى لِلْقُلُوبِ الَّتِي عَقَلَتْ عَنِ اللَّهِ كَلَامَهُ وَفَهِمَتْ أَنْهُ فَهْمًا خَاصًا اختصها به من معاني هذه السورة. Right? So he's saying that there's nothing more healing to the hearts which understand Allah's speech from Him and who grasp and comprehend with a specific type of fahm. Meaning that the cure is for the one who grasps and understands these things. Right? This is who the cure is for. Now he goes on to mention like the body part. Right? So he says, وَأَمَّا تَدَمُّنُهَا لِشِفَاءِ الْأَبْدَانِ. As for it being a cure for the abdan, فنذكر منه ما جاءت به السنة وما شهدت به قواعد الطب ودلت عليه التجربة. So he says here, as for Al-Fātiḥah comprising the healing of the bodies, then we shall mention of them just an example of that what has come in the Sunnah, and also what is attested to by the principles of medicine and what is indicated by experience. So in front of us now there are three things to be discussed. The first thing, from the Sunnah, we're going to illustrate from the Sunnah to show how Al-Fātiḥah is a cure for the bodies. The second thing is we're going to explain how there are principles of medicine that are known to the physicians. We are going to show through these principles of medicine how Al-Fātiḥah is a cure for bodily ailments. And then thirdly, we are going to illustrate by way of personal experience as well. So meaning, Ibn al-Qayyim is going to illustrate to us in three ways. Three ways as to how Al-Fātiḥah comprises the healing for the bodies. So he begins by saying that فأما ما دلت عليه السنة ففي الصحيح من حديث أبي المتوكل عن أبي سعيد الخدري أن ناسا من أصحاب النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم مروا بحي من العرب فلم يقروهم ولم يضيفوهم. So the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, they passed by a hayy, like a region, and of the Arab, of the Bedouins, and they did not entertain them, right? So they didn't host them, they didn't look after them, because we know it's the custom for them to do that normally. So they didn't do that, and they didn't host them. فَلُدِغَ سَيِّدُ الْحَيِّ. Now the chief, the leader, the chief, he was stung by by something, by a scorpion or something like that. فَأَتَوْهُمْ فَقَالُوا هَلْ عِنْدَكُمْ مِنْ رُقْيَةٍ. So then they came to the companion and said, do you have a ruqyah? So, أَوْ هَلْ فِيكُم مِّن رَاقٍ. Or is there anyone among you who can do the incantation? Remember, these are people of disbelief. They are mushrikeen. They're not Muslim, right? So, فَقَالُوا نَعَمْ ولكنكم لم تقرونا فلا نفعل حتى تجعلوا لنا جعلا. So they said, well, yes, but you did not entertain us. You didn't host us. So we are not going to do anything until you give us a price, until you give us something. So فجعلوا لهم على ذلك قطيعا من الغنم. So they said, okay, we will give you a flock of sheep. You can have a flock of sheep. We want you to come and to treat our chief. فجعل رجل منا يقرأ عليه بفاتحة الكتاب. And in the version of Al-Bukhari, وجعل بزاقه ويتفل. Right? So meaning he's reciting Al-Fātiḥah. He's using his spittle, like the saliva, and he's like splitting slightly. And so he treated him like that. فقام كأن لم يكن به قلبه. Then the man, there and then, the man got up as if he had no ache or pain. So it's a sting. A sting is, especially, you know what a bee sting is like. It's very painful, and other things have even more powerful stings. The ache, the pain went from him, and he stood up immediately. فَقُلْنَا لَا تَعْجِلُوا. He said, لَا تَعْجِلُوا حَتَّى نَأْتِي النَّبِيِّ صلى الله عليه وسلم فأتيناه فذكرنا له ذلك. So they said, okay, we're not going to take anything. Let us go to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم and he will come back to you. So they came to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم and they said to him, they mentioned what happened. So he said, ما يدريك أنها رقية. So he said, how did you know that Al-Fātiḥah is a ruqyah? How did you know? كُلُوا, meaning eat from that. وَاضْرِبُوا لِي مَعَكُمْ بِسَحْمٍ. Eat from it and leave for me a portion from it as well. Okay, so now although there are many benefits from this hadith, clearly you can see Al-Fātiḥah is a cure for a physical ailment and a pain, right? So we can see that clearly from the hadith. Ibn Qayyim says, فَقَدْ تَضَمَّنَ هَذَا الْحَدِيث حُصُولِ شِفَاء هَذَا اللَّدِيغِ بِقِرَاءَةِ الْفَاتِحَةِ عَلَيْهِ فَأَغْنَتْهُ عَنِ الدَّوَاءِ. He says, this hadith comprises, it tells us that cure was obtained for this one who was stung just by the recitation of Al-Fātiḥah, making him not in need of any medicine, any physical medicine. And he said, perhaps his cure was reached in such a way that even the physical medicine would not have been able to cure him, right? By Al-Fātiḥah. He says, هذا مع كون المحل غير قابل إما لكون هؤلاء الحي غير مسلمين أو أهل بخل ولؤم فكيف إذا كان المحل قابلا. Now this is important, this part now. Like, he's saying that look at how Al-Fātiḥah was able to cure this physical thing with the pain in a way that even an actual physical medicine by a physician would not have been able to cure. Not only that, but the fact that this person, like the mahal, because what happens is that there's the cure and there's the mahal, right? The cure is the medicine and there is the thing that is receiving the medicine. The thing has to be receptive to the medicine for the cure to be attained. But in this case, even the mahal, which is this pagan, kafir, mushrik leader, right? Like, if you look at, first of all, he's a mushrik kafir, no iman. He doesn't even believe in the Quran or Al-Fātiḥah in the first place. Number two, that these people were people of bukhl, meaning they didn't have like generous hearts to be even hosting these companions and to treat them as they should do, right? So it means that there's a disease of the heart. See, there's a disease of the heart in them, right? So given all of these factors, where it should normally be like not even possible to cure this person, is a mushrik kafir, heart is unclean, right? There were people of bukhl, diseases in their hearts. Even the physical medicine might not even been able to cure the sting. But here, despite all factors to the contrary, Al-Fātiḥah cured this man in an instant. And he stood up as if there was nothing with him. Right, so this is now the hadith, right? This is the hadith. The hadith, what's the hadith proved? It's proven that Al-Fātiḥah is a cure for bodily ailments. But now, how do we understand this through the principles of medicine? Right? How do you understand? Now Ibn al-Qayyim is going to explain through the qawaid of tibb to show how this is the case. So he says, وَأَمَّا شَهَادَتُهُ أَمَّا شَهَادَةُ قواعد الطب بذلك. So he says, okay, how does the principles of medicine testify to this? How can it explain what happened here? How did this happen? Al-Fātiḥah, something you recite, curing a physical, ailment. He says, فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ اللَّدْغَ تَكُونُ مِنْ ذَوَاتِ الْحُمَاةِ وَالسُّمُومِ. Right? So in this instance, the ladgha, the bite or the sting, it comes from animals or beings which have stings and poisons, right? So animals, you have a snake, you have a bee, you have a scorpion, you have various types of, even plants have like, spikes and, you can, some of them are very dangerous, right? Nettles, things like that. So these things هي ذوات الأنفس الخبيثة التي تتكيف بكيفية غضبية. Now I'm reading here the shortened version. If you go back to the original here, there's a bit missing where he's speaking about the evil eye, right? Because the evil eye is similar to the sting as well, right? So you have a sting from animals. These animals, they have like a snake. Inwardly, it's like there's some khubth and anger and like vileness, right? And that's why the sting is powerful and dangerous. So there are certain animals that are like that, right? The anger, out of anger, like the bee stings you because you're bothering it. The snake stings you, like the scorpion stings you. And from it, certain creatures have like this, this nariya ghadabi. They have this like fiery rage and anger, and that now becomes embodied in the sting and the poison that it puts in you. But in exactly the same way, the evil eye is the same thing. So he says, if you go back to the original, there's a whole section, paragraph, which I don't have time to read. But he's explaining that with the evil eye, the same thing happens. There are certain people, they are evil people. They have, like he says here, there are certain people that it's their nature that they have khubth, and they cannot rest unless they go and they harm people, right? Some people have this ghadab. They need to go and harm people, oppress people, because it's in their hearts and they can't rest. Other people have shahwa, It's in their hearts. They have to go and they have to, fulfill their desires in any which way possible. Like it's the khubth that's in there, right? And then likewise with the evil eye, there are some people who have this like filth inside of envy. And so he's going to describe, in the next section, he's going to describe what happens and how a person is stricken, by these poisons, whether they are physical, in the case of animals with a sting, or even with the evil eye, where it involves people and the khubth that comes from them. So he says, فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ اللَّدْغَ تَكُونُ مِنْ ذَوَاتِ الْحُمَاةِ وَالسَّمُومِ وَهِيَ ذَوَاتِ الْأَنفُسِ الْخَبِيثَةِ الَّتِي تَتَكَيَّفْ بِكَيْفِيَّةٍ غَضَبِيَّةٍ. Right? So these poisons that come to you, they come from creatures which have like an element of anger. And they within that animal, like there's a poison that gets activated and stimulated. It is fiery, it is raging, it is poison. So then when he says, so when there's a sting, so in the case of this pagan chief, he got stung from an animal where there is like a ghadab, like there's a summiyya nariya, there's like a raging poison which emanates from anger, right? So this is the disease. So now when you face this disease with the opposite, فإذا قابلت النفس الزاكية العلوية الشريفة التي فيها غضب وهمية للحق. Right? So now there comes a person who likewise has anger. So this is now the person with the Fātiḥah. He comes to the person with the sting, or he comes with the person with the evil eye, he comes with the person with whatever it might be. Within him is anger. There's ghadab, just like there's ghadab that came from the scorpion, the snake, and from the evil eye. So he now has ghadab. But what is this ghadab? This ghadab is out of jealousy for the truth. And it is, in fact, it's more here. If I go back to the original, it's more clearer. He says, فَإِذَا قَابَلَتْ النَّفْسَ الزَّكِيَّةَ الْعُلْوِيَّةَ الشَّرِيفَةَ الَّتِي فِيهَا غَضَبٌ وَحَمِيَّةٌ لِلْحَقِّ. So when it comes and now it stands in the face of these nufus al-khabitha as-sumiyya, these poisonous souls, right, which is men or animals or stings, from which these diseases they emanate of anger and things like that, and they come out and they affect a person. He says, وَتَكَيَّفَتْ بِحَقَائِكِ الْفَاتِحَةِ وَأَسْرَارِهَا وَمَعَانِيهَا وما تضمنته من التوحيد والتوكل والثناء على الله وذكر أصول أسماء الحسنى وذكر اسمه الذي ما ذكر على شر إلا أزاله ومحقه ولا على خير إلا نماه وزاده. Right? So meaning that now when a person comes to someone who's been stung or someone who has the evil eye, where you see that poison has come from anger and rage, from khubth, then a person comes who is a person of tawheed, and in him is the rage and the anger for the truth, for tawheed, for iman, and there are all of he says, the ma'ani, the meanings and the asrar and the secrets of al-Fātiḥah, like what we've been discussing previously. You understand all of that, and you come to that, you come with that, and then you come to this person. And then he says, you mention all these things that that in there's the usul of Allah's names, there's rububiyyah, there's uluhiyyah, there's the cure for the hearts, there is tawassul, there's, all the things that we mentioned previously, and all of that now you come and you are raging with anger for the sake of Allah, and you come and you bring that, and then you stand against the sting or the whatever it might be. He says, دفعت هذه النفس بما تكيفت به من ذلك. So because now this soul has the composition of all of these things, just like in the snake or the scorpion, the anger, right? It allowed the composition of the poison to come into that person. Right now, this one faces that one. It counters it, and it works against it. So he says, He says, فَحَصَلَ الْبُرْء. Right? The cure will then be achieved. The cure will then be achieved. He says, فَإِنَّ مَبْنَ الشِّفَاء وَالْبُرْء عَلَى دَفْعِ الضِّدِّ بِضِدِّهِ وَحِفْظُ الشَّيْء بِمِثْلِهِ. This now are the principles of medicine. Right? So he's saying, the reason is because what is the foundation of cure? فَإِنَّ مَبْنَ الشِّفَاء وَالْبُرْء. It is to repel an opposite with its opposite. This is a principle, well-known principles in medicine. That you repel one opposite with the other opposite. So in this case, whether it is the evil eye, right? So what is the evil eye? Basically, think about it. Let's work through this process. Let's tie all this together. So let's take the evil eye as an example. Evil eye, there's marad in the heart, right? Someone has jealousy, envy, right? Shahwa. These are diseases of the heart. How do they emanate? They emanate from fasadul ilm, fasadul qasd. This person now, the khubth and the filth now, and obviously there's ways that the evil eye happens. Now, evil eye afflicts a person, right? So that ghadab, that hasad, that whatever, one way or another, it afflicts a person and it harms him. So now someone comes along, and in this person who is going to be the raqin, the reader, who's going to be the one with the cure, he has the opposite of what was in that person who gave the evil eye, right? That was fasadul ilm, fasadul qasd, right? Here there is ilm and qasd sahih from al-Fātiḥah and all the knowledge and the meanings and the secrets of Tawheed, Rububiyyah, names and attributes, tawassul to Allah, all the other things, isti'ana, ubudiyyah, everything together, put together, is stacked all together, and there is this anger to, it all builds up, and then you attack the evil eye with that, right? So, according to the principle of medicine, which is a did is attacked and repelled by the did. So this is an opposite to that one, and by necessity it will repel it. Right, by necessity it will do it. And likewise he says, وَحِفْظُ الشَّيْء بِمِثْلِهِ. This is another principle of medicine, that you safeguard and protect something by its like. So he says, وَالْمَرَضْ يُدْفَعْ بِالضِّدِّ. Right, the disease is repelled by its opposite. And he says, as for as-siha tuhfadhu, fasiha tuhfadhu bil mithl. So health is preserved by its like. It's like for like. And disease is repelled with its opposite. These are principles of medicine. Now, so he's explained that, and then if we go back to the short version, he says here, وَلَا يَتِمُّ هَذَا إِلَّا بِقُوَّةٍ مِنَ النَّفْسِ الْفَائِلَةِ. Right? So the cure has to come from the strength of the person who is giving the cure, in this case the raqi, but also وَقَبُولْ مِنَ الطَّبِيعَةِ الْمُنْفَئِلَةِ. But it also has to be the willingness and the acceptance of that person. So in this case, that mushrik, he was anticipating and expecting the cure, right? That there has to be like an acceptance of that the cure is going to happen. فَلَوْ لَمْ تَنْفَعِ النَّفْسٌ الْمَلْدُوغ لِقَبُولِ الرُّقْيَةِ وَلَمْ تَقْوِ نَفْسُ الرَّاقِي عَلَى التَّأْثِيرِ لَمْ يَحْصُلْ الْبُرْ. Right? So now there's another component. He's saying that if this person who was stung didn't have within him the anticipation and the expectation of being cured, alongside the strength of the raqi, right? So the strength of the raqi, what's he bringing? He's bringing the strength of al-Fātiḥah, right? The did against the poison or the evil eye. And he's bringing all the meanings of al-Fātiḥah. So that is there, but also there has to be there the anticipation and the expectation of the healing from the mahal, in this case, which is the mushrik and the polytheist. So when these things come together, then the cure will happen. Right. So now, you have to stop and think here that look at how, like all the circumstances that we mentioned about this mushrik. This is a mushrik, doesn't believe, not a believer, no tawheed, no iman. There's no, so there's that first of all. Then there is the fact that these people were stingy and they didn't host the companions. So there's bukhl, so disease in the heart already. And despite all of that, Al-Fātiḥah, because of the strength of Al-Fātiḥah and the person reading it, and the qabul of the nafsul maldugh, right? The cure was immediate and effective there and then. Now, I want to take a slight diversion because to stop right here, because there's something very important that we have to discuss here. Is something that the scholars of the Muslims, they speak about. And Ibn al-Qayyim said, at-tabi'a al-munfa'ila. Right? This is like the nature of a person where you are anticipating and expecting a cure. This is now to do with emotions and feelings and your expectations, because this has a tremendous, powerful effect on health and disease. Right? And I'm going to read something to you from a hadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam from Ibn Abbas. It's hadith in Al-Bukhari. And Prophet he used to visit the ill people. And when he would visit them, he would say, La ba'as tahur insha'Allah. As you know, right? La ba'as tahur insha'Allah. So he came upon a Bedouin, there was a Bedouin, and he was visiting him, and he said to him, La ba'as tahur insha'Allah. He said this to the Bedouin. But the Bedouin replied, he said, Qulta tahur. Tahur. You said it's purification. And he said, Kalla. He said, Bal hiya humma. He said, rather this is a fever, tafuru or tathuru ala shaykhin. This is a fever that is basically like it's harming and hurting a shaykh, a kabir, a shaykhin kabir. Tuziruhu al-qubur. And it is going to make him to visit the grave. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Idhan fana'am. Idhan fana'am. So the Bedouin, when the Messenger of Allah was saying to him to be optimistic, it's purification, inshallah, this is what it is, the fever. He said, the purification? This is a fever, like a raging fever. It sends people to the graves. So the Messenger said to the Sallam, Idhan fana'am. Okay. So now when we go back to the scholars of the Muslims and the scholars who, sharh upon this hadith, first of all from Ibn Rajab, rahimahullah, he says, يعني أنه لم يقبل الطهارة بل ردها وأخبر أن حماه بما أخبر به نفسه فحصل ما اختاره لنفسه. So he said, meaning that this man didn't really accept. He didn't accept like the Messenger of Allah saying, don't worry, it's purification, and he rejected this, and he said that this fever, is going to do to me what the fever is going to do to me. So what he chose for himself happened. What he chose for himself happened. And likewise, Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah, he said about this hadith, تَقْدِيرُهُ إِذَا أَبَيْتَ فَنَعْمْ. So when the Messenger said, إِذَا فَنَعْمْ, what he means is, إِذَا أَبَيْتَ. If you refuse, meaning if you refuse to accept, I'm telling you that, لَا بَأَسْ طَهُورٍ inshallah, it will be purification for you and so on and so forth, then فَنَعْمْ, then yes. كَانَ كَمَا ظَنَنْتَ. It will be as you expect or think it to be. Right? So this is one of the interpretations of this hadith. And likewise, when we go back to like Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen, rahimahullah, he says likewise, he says, وَالْإِنْفِعَالِ النَّفْسِ لَهُ أَثَرٌ كَبِيرٌ فِي إِدْعَافِ الْإِنسَانِ. Right? Like emotions, have a great effect in weakening a person. فأحيانا يتوهم الصحيح أنه مريض فيمرض، وأحيانا يتناسى الإنسان المرض وهو مريض فيصبح صحيحا. فانفعال النفس بالشيء له أثر بالغ. He says emotions can have a great effect in weakening a person. Sometimes a person might just think that he's actually ill, but he's not actually ill, and he will make himself ill. He will make himself ill. And sometimes a person forgets even that he's even ill, or forgets illness, and he becomes healthy, like the disease just disappears by itself. So therefore the emotion for infi'al and nafs bishay has a mighty effect upon actual health and actual illness, right? So here in this case, what's happened is this man, like, he's not anticipating the cure, he's not, and he's just thinking that it's going to send him to the grave. And in fact, in some of the ahadith that you find that the next morning, the man actually died. He died, right? So it happened as he expected it to be. So this whole thing about, the emotions, it's something, as you see, Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen mentioned it, it is something well studied even by the people of disbelief. And they do experiments to show the power of the mind and the power of expectation. I'll give an example. I'll give you 2-3 examples. An example of where they take these students and they said that we're going to give you these electric currents on your heads, and they give headaches. They give you headaches. So we're going to bring you in. So they put these plates on the heads. They put whatever, and they say this is going to give you a headache, right? So what happens is that actually they gave them nothing. There's no electric current or anything going through. It's just there's nothing even there. So then when the students go back and they find that 70%, 7 in 10 actually started reporting that they were getting headaches, right? And so this is the power of the mind, making it's like a self-fulfilling, just like this man said that this humma, tuziruhu al-qubur, it makes people go to the graves. Well, that's right, yeah, they will take you to the grave because if that's your belief, right? And there are many experiments like this. They call it a psychogenic illness, where you make yourself ill. You make yourself ill. They even have research here. There's a paper here that illness expectations predict the development of, like in the winter season, this is proper research done, like controlled, that if you expect to get ill in the winter, then you are likely to actually be ill, right? The research done on taking hundreds of volunteers, and they look at their expectations, then they check to see who became ill, who never became ill, and conclusions, these results support the hypothesis of self-fulfilling prophecy mechanism related to, in this case, influenza-like symptoms, right? So basically, if you anticipate and expect that you are going to be ill, then it is shown through research that you are more likely to actually become ill. So it's as if you are making yourself ill by your actual expectation, right? So this is proven and shown. We're not here trying to show, look at this proves the hadith of the messenger. No, we're not saying that. We don't need this to prove the hadith of the messenger of Allah. We're just showing that this is something real, observed. The scholars of the Muslims, they speak about it, and illness the mind has a powerful role in actual generating illness, right? So you can either be optimistic, as the messenger of Allah was telling this man, la ba'as tahur inshallah, and you be optimistic and think, yes, inshallah, I will be cured, inshallah, this is nothing, this is a purification, it's this, and you have optimistic outlook. That will then affect your body in, working in a way that it works on the cure in the background. Or you can be negative and pessimistic and expect the worst, and so it will be, as the messenger said, as Ibn Hajar said, فَكَانَ كَمَا ظَنَنْتَ. It will be as you expect it and as you think it to be, right? So this shows that this, now coming back now, so once we made that diversion and we come back here to this man, to the, to this polytheist, this man is he's a polytheist, and lost where I am now. So we come to the end, coming to the end of what he said, Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah. So he says, فَهُنَا أُمُورٌ ثَلَاثَةٌ. So he's coming back to summarize the principles of medicine, of the three principles of medicine. He says there are three things. Number one, مُوَافَقَةُ الدَّوَاءِ لِلدَّاءِ. Right? So the medicine has to correspond to the illness. Right? It has to be like for like. It has to be correspond. Number two, وَبَذْلُ الطَّبِيبِ لَهُ. The physician, in this case the raqi, has to expend his efforts to do so. Right? So what is the cure here? It is al-Fātiḥah. And the person using it is the raqi. So he's got to expend the effort, meaning that he's got to bring all those things together, the asrar, the ma'ani, and everything. And then وَقُبُولْ طَبِيعَةَ الْعَلِيلِ. So the sick person, his tabi'ah, his nature has to be receptive. To the treatment, to the cure. فَمَتَى تَخَلَّفَ وَاحِدٌ مِنْهَا لَمْ يَحْصُلْ الشِّفَاء وَإِذَا اجْتَمَعَتْ حَصَلَ الشِّفَاء وَلَا بُدَّ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. So when all these three things come together, then by necessity the healing will happen. And if one of them disappears, if one of them is not present, then it will not occur. So now this was the second one, right? So the first one was the hadith that proves al-Fātiḥah is a cure. The second one here, he has illustrated by way of the principles of medicine. The principles of medicine, that you treat an opposite with an opposite. You treat a thing with its opposite, right? And we gave the example of either something physical, which is the poison, and al-Fātiḥah is the opposite of that, or it can be the evil eye. Al-Fātiḥah is the opposite is the cure for the sicknesses of the heart that came from the one who gave the evil eye, right? So in both respects, the heart or the body, al-Fātiḥah is a cure. How is it a cure? It depends on the strength of the person bringing it and the receptiveness of the person who's receiving the treatment. So the third, I said, is he gives an example from experience, right? So we said from the sunnah, from the qawaid of tibb, and the third one is tajriba, is personal experience. And personal experience is an acceptable, valid, something can be used in medicine. This whole idea where you have to have a randomized control study and systematic review, this didn't exist before. How were people healing themselves and curing themselves for thousands of years before the modern idea of the peer review, systematic review, random control trial? No, this is the monopoly that's been created to keep medicine in a monopoly. But there were no such things in the time of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? Are you going to come and say, show me a randomized control trial of, to show that al-Fātiḥah? Who's going to speak like this? Are you going to speak like this about the revelation and the sunnah? Right? So tajriba, experience, is valid in medicine. Tajriba. This is how people learn. This is how people develop the medicine. Right? It is valid. So now the third type, so the sunnah, principles of medicine, now it is tajriba, meaning from personal experience. So he says, وَأَمَّا شَهَادَةُ التَّجَارُبِ بِذَلِكَ. Right? This is shahada of the sunnah, shahada of the qawaid of tibb, and the shahada of personal experience. So he says, وَأَمَّا شَهَادَةُ التَّجَارُبِ بِذَلِكَ فَهِيَ أَكْثَرُ مِنْ أَن تُذْكَرَ وَذَلِكَ فِي كُلِّ زَمَانٍ. These experiences are so many, right? There are so many that when you collate them, there are so many of these types of experiences. He says, وَذَلِكَ فِي كُلِّ زَمَانٍ, in every age and era, وَقَدْ جَرَبْتُ أَنَا مِنْ ذَلِكَ فِي نَفْسِي وَفِي غَيْرِي أُمُورًا عَجِيبًا. I have experienced this myself personally, and others have, amazing affairs, especially in the time which I was resident in Mecca. عزها الله تعالى, may Allah make it strong and mighty. He said, فَإِنَّهُ كَانَ يَعْرِضُ لِي آلام مُزْعِجَةً. I used to be afflicted with really painful, horrendous, illnesses and pains, where even I was unable to move. I wasn't able to move, have any motion. وَذَلِكَ فِي أَثْنَاءِ الطَّوَافِ وَغَيْرِهِ. This is during tawaf and other than tawaf. So I would read Al-Fātiḥah and I would wipe, the place of pain or the whatever it was, and it is as if فَكَأَنَّهُ حُسَاتٌ تَسْقُطْ. It's as if pebbles are dropping one by one and the pain's just dissipating just like that. And جَرَّبْتُ ذَلِكَ مِرَارًا عَدِيدًا. I experienced this so it's not just like once it happened, but it's repeatedly that this happens. وَكُنْتُ آخِذُ قَدْحًا مِنْ مَاءِ زَمْزَمْ. So I would take a container with Zamzam water, I would recite upon it Al-Fātiḥah numerous times, I would drink it, and I would find such benefit and strength which I never had before in this treatment. وَالْأَمْرُ أَعْظَمُ مِنْ ذَلِكَ. The affair is much bigger than this. وَلَكِنْ بِحَسَبِ قُوَّةِ الْإِيمَانِ. But it is in accordance with the strength of Iman, right? So where's the cure lying? Like it has to be behind it, there has to be strength of Iman. وَصِحَّةِ الْيَقِينِ. There has to be sound certainty, absolute. So you got to believe in the thing, right? Wallahu al-musta'an. And from Allah is aid sought. This brings us to the end, really, of this section, to the end of that. And so to summarize, basically, then we've looked at another lofty affair which is in Al-Fātiḥah, which is Shifa'ul Qulub wa Shifa'ul Abdan, both, one or the other. In fact, let me go back. Ibn al-Qayyim said, shahadat of tajriba, of experience. Even now we know from many personal experiences, you have many of these groups where people put in their medical experiences and they share experiences, and there are people who, they say that we cured this person's ailment with Al-Fātiḥah, just your recitation, and we cured this person's ailment. This is known, as Ibn al-Qayyim said, that this is in every, fi kulli zaman. This tajriba is known by people who have that yaqeen, who have that certainty, who have that persistence, and they bring all the elements that we mentioned of the shifa, the components that we mentioned earlier on, shifa of the qulub, shifa of the abdan. In fact, one other point I forgot to mention is that the shifa of the qulub is the asal for the shifa of the abdan. Right? Now, the way to understand this is think about it, because we know that sins, really the origin of illnesses and sicknesses is aslan, it is sin, right? Sin. Right? Sin is what brings these trials and tribulation calamities. Now the sin itself, what's the sin emanating from? The sin has to emanate from the sicknesses of the heart. Fasadul ilm, fasadul qasd. Right? So for you to have committed a sin, it's got to be shahwa, it's got to be shuh, it's got to be hasad, it's got to be bukhl, it's got to be one of these things for which you committed the sin. It's got to be dhulm, it's got to be whatever. So when you commit the sin, you now commit a sin. You steal, you murder, you commit zina, you whatever it might be. So you're committing these sins. These actions, as a rule in Allah's creation, somehow, we don't know how, but Allah Azza wa Jal, these actions turn into punishments through the scheme of Allah's creation in a way that He knows. So this now turns into punishment. Those punishments, as Ibn al-Qayyim mentions somewhere else, can take various forms. It can be a famine, it can be a tyrannical ruler, it can be diseases, it can be anxieties and grief, right? So when all of that happens, then we come back. So then where do we come back to treat the asal of the problem? It is the healing of the heart that's going to cure the disease, the physical diseases that aslan, where did they come from? From the amrad of the qulub. Do you get the connection, the link that we're making here? The point being that all physical illnesses and ailments, because aslan they come because of sin, that sin itself must have come from the diseases of the hearts, right? And so therefore, if you want the bodies to be cured, you have to first cure the hearts. right? So meaning that the heart has to be cured first with the things that were mentioned before you even go to the other things, right? Then you have to, then you cure the physical aspects if the heart is cured. And so all of this ties into the fact what Ibn al-Qayyim said at the very end, that there has to be sihhatul yaqeen, and there has to be true iman, and there has to be true certainty and true iman, that you firmly believe all these things and you come at the disease of the heart or the body with all of this understanding, and inshallah that will lead to the cure. So inshallah we'll end our lesson there for today, and we'll conclude. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.